to say about how I came to do this show and about the works. The title of the show comes from kind of about 2 years ago. I was getting more and more alarmed by the amount of plastic that I was finding. A lot of my work has to do with the coast, so I go to the coast a lot, and all the plastic that was around, I was collecting it as a way of sort of collecting materials and also thinking about kind of cleaning the beach slightly, so it had a sort of dual purpose in a way. So the coastline for me represents many things. It's quite an ambivalent site, marking the frontier of slavery, colonialism and migration. But there's also something about it signalling the positivity of the diasporan experience. There is something poetic about objects that are found on the beach in the way that they have been to different shores, and I have this sense that they might have touched the shores of where I'm from, my motherland, so they might have been somewhere near India. So that sort of goes on in my head when I'm picking up objects. So that for me is a very sort of comforting thing, being somebody that's from somewhere else. I feel exiled. My childhood has been being brought up in India, but I've also been here for a long time, so I've kind of absorbed culture from the UK as well. But then thinking about that's really sort of helpful for me. But then the more sort of darker, alarming aspect is also how all this discarded matter is polluting our oceans. And I first started kind of thinking about this really seriously when I was confronted with all this plastic, when I was going to the coast a lot, and I was studying for my MA when I was in Wales. And I remember coming across a copy of the National Geographic magazine, and that kind of stayed with me, and I just wanted to read you a quote from the magazine, which is about Hawaii's outer kingdom. The islands are owned by wildlife. It is clearly their place, not ours, even though human intervention is needed to ensure protection. The calligraphy of the beach morning glories writes its free-form messages on the leeward side of the Laysan Island, a nesting ground for 2 million seabirds, as well as the endangered species that are on the island, the finch and the duck. The message on Laysan's windward side, the right side, is repeated all along the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. No place is remote enough. The bottles, the floats, the TV screens all fell off ships at sea or washed off distant shorelines and were carried here by currents. Across the islands, researchers and wildlife managers haul off most of the dangerous debris, fishing lines, nets, ropes that easily strangle birds, turtles and monk seals. My work, the series that you're looking at here, is called Unnatural Selection, Survival of the Plastic, and this is a response to the environmental issues of ocean pollution. And I remember seeing this image of a dissected seagull's stomach, and this image has stayed with me. It's very haunting. I wanted to read you another part of the journal. Victim, Laysan albatross chick, age 6 months, cause of death, starvation due to full stomach, contents of stomach, cigarette lighters, pump top sprayer, nutshells, shotgun shell, broken clothespins, hundreds of plastic bits. Taking this image a step further, I wanted to create a new species, where the birds that were around the ocean had swallowed so much plastic that part of their anatomy is visibly composed of plastic. So they come to have plastic beaks, wings, feet, and so on. And then the embroidered patterns that are on are incorporated into the sculptures, and they reference some of the colourful patterns of some of the birds. And then I also wanted to combine, I wanted to use particularly South Asian textiles as a way of thinking about the migratory activity of birds and also the migration of humans. The title, Unnatural Selection, Survival of the Plastic, also refers to Charles Darwin's theory of evolution and the ideas in relation to natural selection. This is how creatures evolve, and it takes into account environmental factors. So to me, this is unnatural that there is so much plastic, and it's affecting our animals and birds. And then survival of the fittest is about how whichever creature kind of adapts the most the best way of being surviving survives. So you wouldn't get creatures surviving that have got some kind of injury or some defect or something that's not good for the environment. So I then decided to call it survival of the plastic, because actually the plastic isn't degrading, it's surviving, and it's becoming part of the creatures. Textiles is also another important part of my practice. So this work brings together the collecting and the textiles. And it's actually kind of two separate collections that are quite linked, because the textiles have been sourced from different places. So some of them are from actually my family, and they're my mother's, and some of them I've got from vintage markets. But it's usually things that are lying around in bins in the vintage markets. It's doesn't tend to be anything that's going to be very kind of sought after, is what I've found. And then it actually started with finding that a lot of the textiles I had were eaten by moths, and I hadn't realised when I opened up this chest one day and found that beautiful saris, Kashmiri shawls and woolen fabrics had all been infested by moths. So I thought, what shall I do? This is terrible. And I thought, well, actually, hang on, I can take all these to the studio. So I started collecting all these textiles on a shelf, and then I kind of arranged them a bit like, one might arrange a paint palette. So according to colours, texture, where the textiles have come from. And it's also kind of becoming a way of looking at cultural difference. I have tweed fabrics, sort of fabrics that are more kind of, you'd find in the Western world, as well as sort of embroidered fabrics and gold fabrics that I associate more with South Asia. And then it's kind of become more about environmental issues as well, because I think the fashion industry has there's a lot of clothes that are being made. Some of them are very expensive that are actually still destroyed. I was horrified when I found that fashion collections are actually destroyed when they're out of season. And then also there's fast fashion where things are worn once that are destroyed. So I've actually got kind of fabrics, textiles from fast fashion as well as sort of really treasured items, because actually none of this is this is all going to be staying, and all these things that people are kind of wearing once are going to the landfill, which is, I think, so this really resonates with my work, so that's why I thought I'd mention it. Gomez's organ-like organisms are bodies among bodies that also serve as portraits through the artist's use of found and gifted materials. The act of pulling these materials apart and stitching them into a new form of sewing and tying and retying and twisting and tying again creates a tangible bridge between the past and the present. So for me this is kind of really relevant, because this is a way of preserving the past. So ripped, damaged textiles that were once worn with pride are now not so, they're sort of discarded. So this creates a bridge between what has passed, all the kind of the family occasions that have passed, and what's now and what's to come.
And for this exhibition, it's been really great, because when I came to look around and I was talking with Julie, I was asking about the kind of works, and Julie said, I'd really like some hanging works in the gallery. And so I thought, well, this is incredible, because quite often I will take hanging works to places and go, oh, no, we can't hang this, it's going to be really tricky. So I then became very excited about creating hanging works. So these two works I've created specifically for this show, for this space. And the one that's over there, the hanging work over there, I've kind of reconstructed, and it relates to these two pieces. So this one is called Take Possession, and this one here is called On Being Purple. And both of these are created using a single piece of netting that was washed up on a deserted beach in Dorset. And this beach, you can't get to it very easily. You have to go right down some very slippery steps, and kind of no one goes there. So it's a bit like going somewhere sort of quite far away, and yet it's quite close to beaches that people go to quite a lot. So it's a real sort of treasure. And one day I came across these two sort of structures. So I decided to work on them, and then I was also thinking about all the sort of the ghost nets, the fishing nets that have been abandoned, lost or discarded at sea, in beaches or in harbours, particularly because of the devastation they cause to marine life. So that's kind of as well as thinking about the plastic, the netting, the debris is also fatal. I wanted to also use vintage textiles from South Asia, because I was also thinking about the migration of humans, particularly of women coming across oceans. And then there's two other pieces. There's one called Behind the Bonnet, which is hanging up in the bathroom, and then or the washroom or toilet, and then this one here. This one here is I wanted to talk a bit about, because it's a response to the lockdown, as well as being about the kind of the environmental pollution. So the broken pieces of debris that are part of that were actually pieced together to create a single hair mass. So it looks like it's one single piece, but it's actually kind of lots of different bits of debris. And I was trying to reference this, what's been happening in the pandemic, and how people have kind of lost their businesses, they've lost what was important in their lives, as a way of kind of somehow repairing what's been lost and trying to create something else out of it, something that's different, but in some ways might be positive. And I wanted to read you a quote from an essay by Acharya-Baskerville. Utra's written, is a textiles specialist. She's an independent curator who's written an essay in the catalogue, which is available if you'd like to look at it, or if you'd like to buy it. So she's written, long hair has featured in many myths, religious and folk stories. From Rapunzel to Medusa, Shiva's matted locks, and the gopis adorning Krishna. In the Ramayana, which is an ancient sacred text, Lord Shiva is said to have used his locks of hair to break the flow of the mighty Ganga, which is the Ganges River. This is one of the holiest rivers for Hindus, and yet it is one of the most polluted rivers in the world. The gopis are female cow herders, unconditionally devoted to Lord Krishna. They are known for their beauty, joyfulness, and are always depicted with very long hair. Hair has always been a thing of beauty, entrapment, and envy. All these concepts are captured in the series of hanging works. works. So here Utra is referring to this piece here, and also the hanging works, which actually are in the film that you can watch a bit later, or you might have seen it already. Once again, so the long backtrack tendrils are caught in a mesh of nets, and once again the hanging rope-like structures prove a sense of play and mischief and a collective strength. So play is a really important part of my work, and I spend a lot of time kind of playing with materials, kind of looking at them for possibilities, possibilities for transformation. And in my studio, I feel a bit like a child, just kind of playing with materials and then trying to construct my own toys. And I'm very interested in looking at materials in a non-hierarchical way. And I mentioned this in relation to textiles, but also it applies to other materials, such as, a piece of molten plastic is as valuable as a piece of jewellery to me, and that's the approach I take in the studio. And I also see these objects and materials as my collaborators, so I don't necessarily like to impose a new shape or destroy them, but I'm working very much with them. So the shapes that I found, the materials that I found originally, are kind of here as well. They're being celebrated rather than changed completely into something else. So I wanted to leave you with a quote from Utra's essay, and then sum up. The things that we throw out come back to haunt us. As humans continue to exhaust the Earth's natural resources, environmental waste we cause creates life-threatening toxic pollution. This is what we leave behind, and this is the title of Utra's essay. And so, just sort of summing up, I think really in terms of thinking about the materials in our environment, people collect materials that reflect who they are, so this idea of we are what we keep, but actually we are what we throw away. So all the sort of the stuff that's thrown away is also our identity. So I wanted to leave you with that. Thank you.